Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker has just announced that he plans on running for president of the United States. In fact, he put out an incredibly cheesy ad, which we're about to show you in a second, that's full of lies, which we will debunk afterwards. Take a look.
For too long, they've said we have to compromise our principles to win. Scott Walker showed the path to victory is to run on our principles. Conservative, bold, decisive. He balanced budgets, cut taxes, beat the special interests, improved education, created jobs, and showed how to fight and win.
America needs new, fresh leadership with big, bold ideas from outside of Washington. Actually get things done. In Wisconsin, we didn't nibble around the edges. We enacted big, bold reforms, took power out of the hands of the big government special interests, gave it to the hardworking taxpayer. People's lives are better because of it. We fought and we won. Now I'm running for president to fight and win for the American people. Without sacrificing our principles, we won 3 elections in 4 years in a blue state. Did it by leading. Now we need to do the same thing for America. It's not too late. We can make our country great again. Join our cause and help us fight and win for America.
So it's incredible that we have laws out there against false advertising. But when it comes to politicians, they can literally say whatever they want, regardless of how deceptive it is, and it goes unchecked. So he talks about how he saved the economy in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is in a disastrous state right now, considering the number of people that are unemployed, the amount of money that was cut from public education. People are not loving the way the economy is in Wisconsin, but he's talking about how he's all about economic prosperity.
And I don't know what you're talking about. It said in the ad that he helped education. It even showed young black kids that were helped.
He's amazing. It's incredible how deceptive that ad was. I mean, no one should be surprised, but why aren't there any laws preventing deceptive political ads like that? It's incredible. You can't just say, I did great things for the economy in Wisconsin, when in reality, after you took office, you actually increased unemployment there.
Yeah, well, according to the Supreme Court, you can. You can say things like that. You can lie and get away with it.
So let me give you some examples really quickly, okay? So The Hill did this really great comparison of Wisconsin and Minnesota. Now, in Minnesota, you have Governor Mark Dayton, who did a lot of liberal policies, right? So he raised taxes on the wealthy, and as a result, they had enough revenue to help the economy there. In Wisconsin, Scott Walker did the exact opposite. So even just a glance at economic metrics in Wisconsin tells a story of stifled job growth, ballooning deficits, remember he balanced the budget, and a shrinking middle class.
And this is according to The Hill. The Hill is enormously nonpartisan.
Yes.
They're frustratingly neutral sometimes.
Yes, that's right.
Right? Like, hey, give us the facts. So even they have to say, like, wait a minute now. We just got to speak out here. That it doesn't appear to be true based on the numbers.
Okay, so I have more for you. After running on the promise to create 250,000 new private sector jobs by the end of his first term, Walker didn't just fail to meet this goal, he failed miserably, creating barely half of his promised amount, okay? Also, he created something known as the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, okay? The WEDC, which Walker chaired, gave out taxpayer-funded loans to hundreds of companies in the hopes of spurring growth. But the jobs Walker promised never materialized. Instead, in an epic display of mismanagement, WEDC lost track of millions of dollars in loans, gave awards to ineligible businesses, and has generally been a poor steward of taxpayer money. Wisconsin only saw 1.5% private sector job growth in 2014. It lags far behind the national growth rate of 2.6%.
We showed what we could do in Wisconsin. We can take the national growth rate, which is not that great, and really lower. Okay, we can go lower. Just give me another term. I'll go even lower.
Yeah,
Scott Walker.
You know, you're going to have some, I think, pretty easy campaign moments for Hillary Clinton when you look at the growth of the economy, the lowering of unemployment over the last 3 or 4 years, except in states with Republican governors who have enacted draconian cuts, where there's just going to be like, hey, look what's happening in Kansas, look what's happening in Wisconsin, you know, and maybe Michigan, other states where that's happened.
Yeah.
And then you won't see it in, you know, in Ohio, where you got a guy who at least seems to be willing to govern.
So in Minnesota, they had a $5 billion deficit And then Mark Dayton, the governor there, was like, all right, well, we need to raise taxes on the wealthy. After he did that, now there's a $1 billion budget surplus in Minnesota. A budget surplus, right? He didn't have to go out and do all these crazy cuts to education and to, social services and programs for the needy. I mean, he did the common sense thing of making sure that people pay their fair share in taxes. And it's incredible because, I mean, how do politicians have the ability to lie about these things during their presidential campaigns? People do not have perfect information because politicians can lie, the media can lie, they're fed all this misinformation, and then they vote based on the misinformation that they have.
Well, let me give you a piece of information. Since Mark Dayton made those cuts, all the wealthy people in Minnesota have died.
No, they immediately, according to the Republicans, they immediately leave the state. There are no wealthy people left in Minnesota. I don't know how they have a surplus. Okay.
Right, their main tax base has just fled.
Yeah, it went to Wisconsin, and that's why Wisconsin's so much better off. Oh, right, they're not. And the people of Minnesota have stayed exactly where they are, and they're much better off for it. So all the BS Republican ideology is not really rooted in facts. It's rooted in trying to get to the right result. So they want to lower taxes for the rich. So they say if you raise taxes on the rich will flee, you'll have no revenue base left, and your revenues for the government will actually go down and your deficits will get worse. Not true. In Minnesota, they raised taxes on the rich. They've got $1 billion surplus. They did more than balance the budget. And then they could turn around and use that $1 billion to help the people in Minnesota, whether it's infrastructure, education, or whatever it might be. Meanwhile, in Wisconsin, they're cutting education because they don't have enough money because they give it all to the rich. Now, the good news and bad news for Scott Walker is he announced in the middle of Trumpamania, so nobody is going to bother nitpicking his facts, or even checking his facts at all outside of what you just saw, right? So that's the good news for Scott Walker. The bad news is, who's Scott Walker? In the middle of the whole Trump thing, nobody's paying any attention to him going, hey, I'm in the race, everybody. Like, nobody gives a shit. Having said, don't get me wrong, Walker is one of the top 3 candidates. He has a ton of Sheldon Adelson money, and he has a ton of Koch brothers money. And so
he's the most Koch acolyte.
Yeah, he's Koch plus.
Yeah, he's Koch plus.
Okay, and so he's in it.
Bernie
here.
Sanders is Koch zero.
That's right. And so to Anna's point, he's going to have a ton of money to put out that misinformation. How is he going to win? How are people not going to find out what he did wrong in Wisconsin?
They will. They're not going to find. They're not finding out today, but they'll find out. I mean, because he's going to keep touting it. I mean, he can't help himself. It's not just the commercial that's going to. He'll talk about it in the debate. He'll continue to talk about it. Republicans will do a fairly nice job of slamming him for it because they need to. He leads in most Iowa polls. So he's and New Hampshire, I believe. He's an incredibly serious candidate. And Iowa, right off the bat, for a guy from Wisconsin, it's almost a must-win state for him. And, he also has the ability, while being, I think, just about with Ted Cruz, the most conservative, depending on how you rank Donald Trump, because Trump has some other ideas that are not totally out to lunch just because he is a businessman and he had to make some deals. I don't know why, but he's not crazy on everything. He's dumb on everything, but he's not crazy on everything. But Scott Walker, he's kind of goofy. He's a bit of a doofus. But if he plays that right, that can be endearing, and he will make an effort to have himself, because the conservatives already know his bona fides. So he will now engage in some sort of an effort to be like, no, man, I'm just a regular guy. I governed in a blue state. Look at me. I'm like Chris Christie, except there's no corruption. Except there is.
Yeah.
And so he's a dangerous candidate. He's an incredibly dangerous candidate if he gets to the general election.
And so he will spend a ton of money touting all this stuff. Huckabee won't have the money to counter him, so he'll win against the smaller candidates. But eventually he's going to run into the Jeb Bushes of the world who are going to go, whoa, wait a minute now, right? That's not exactly right, because they have an incentive to defeat him, right? Ted Cruz is not going to pull any punches. So his money will, at some point, if it gets down to it, will be working against Scott Walker. Having said that, we've had a lot of disagreements in this segment. Let me end with one. Endearing. I believe Scott Walker is 0% endearing to anyone, not just us. Obviously, we don't like him, right?
You don't like that comb over? You don't find that endearing?
Oh my God! And who's pinching his nose? And I just But you know what? Maybe I'm wrong, Ben. Maybe to the Republican base, they look at that guy and they go,
oh my my
Oh,
God.
shucks, that's my guy.
No, but I mean, like, I'm just
I
saying.
remember when he crushed the unions and made sure people didn't get paid
That was
money
awesome.
for working hard. That was great.
Look, we have to be able to separate the whole conversation from the policy. They like the policy, right? The policy's not a problem with him. So the idea is what kind of guy you look. It's why George Bush won, right? What kind of guy you kind of seem to be.
Yeah, and I don't see that in Scott
I don't
Walker.
see that much in Scott Walker either. So that's what I'm saying. What I was trying to suggest was, can he do that? Is he capable of doing that? Ted Cruz, while can win over a room, there's still that sort of demonic crazy person thing that happens with Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
Scott Walker doesn't have a demonic crazy person problem. He just has a policy problem. And I get it. He's not like super handsome or anything, but we've elected guys like that before. Guys like that, let me rephrase that. Guys like that have done well if they can package themselves the right way. And being from Wisconsin and having governed in a blue state and being the thing that Cenk likes, right, and admires, that we all admire when we analyze politics. He is, no, I'm going to stare you down and I'm going to win and I'm going to kick you and I'm going to kick you when you're down. I'm a winner. I'm a winner. People will respond to that. And if he does this right while seeming to be nice while doing that, while projecting that strength, he's a super dangerous candidate, I think.
I will say-
Others, real quick, I'm sorry, but a slate thing today, 10 seconds, that suggested that he's a buffoon with no chance of winning. And it's the first time I'd read that.
I don't think that's true. But another thing that I'd add is the one thing that he definitely does have in common with Bush is that unearned confidence. Because what you said is totally right? Like, he can't help himself. He has to boast about what he thinks he achieved. And watching that ad gives you a sense of what he thinks about himself, right? He really thinks that he nailed it.
Right, but the difference between him, that's true, no question. But the difference between him and Bush is Bush really didn't earn it. I mean, Bush was a governor of a state that legislature barely met, and all the control was with the legislature. I mean, he got elected governor because he has the same name as his dad, right? And he was affable and a glad hander, and he owned a baseball team, and he liked checking the box scores, you know? And he was super friendly, right? And he liked to paint. This guy did govern, and this guy did beat the unions. He took them on, and he won in a state where a lot of people didn't think that could happen. So, you know, he's an executive. He is a chief executive, and he chief executived poorly, but he did what he wanted to do. And the way we responded as a country inexplicably to Dick Cheney, we might respond inexplicably, the party might respond inexplicably to Scott Walker.